In this video, we're going to go over some of the features of Maply. The current version is 2.2, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there. Now, the most common way that people use Maply is to display a tiled base map. And a tiled base map is a collection of a lot of little images that are stitched together to make one big one. Now, what we're looking at here is the geography class example from Mapbox. And this one is being stored locally, so it's very fast to page in the individual tiles. So as we move around, we're paging individual tiles in and out, putting them in the right place. And we're also getting rid of the old tiles. So anything you don't see is removed from memory. That's hard to catch at paging, but if you pay attention around the edges, you can see the low resolution will turn into high resolution. And as we zoom out, the higher resolution will be gotten rid of and replaced with lower resolution. Now, in addition to being able to page local tile sets like this Mapbox tiles dataset here, we can also page remote datasets. So let's look at, again from Mapbox, the terrain sample, which is a combination of streets and other information, as well as some nice elevation relief. So as we zoom into London, we can see that we're paging in new tiles as needed, and these are coming over the network, so there's a bit of delay as they appear. And if we go to a region we haven't looked at before, we see that it pages in those tiles and displays them as they come in. And then if we go back to a region we've paged in already that's cached, then it's much faster to display. So that's kind of the most common usage of Maply, but there are other things you can do with it as well. And in the next example, we're going to look at, again, a standard base map with overlays. And in this case, we're going to overlay some weather data. So we've got the, again, it's from Mapbox, the satellite data set that they provide as an example. And overlaid on top of that, we've got an animated data set from Forecast.io, the guys who make Dark Sky. And in this case, we're displaying that cloud data set on top of the satellite data set. And you have a fair amount of control over that. You can control what frame you're looking at, how it's interpolated, or if you really want to get fancy, you can even provide your own OpenGL ES shader, which will control how that's rendered. And there's some really interesting things you can do with that. So those were image examples where we were displaying image data sets. Let's take a look at a vector data set. And in this example here, what we're going to see is the base map for the geography class again, and overlaid on top of that are vectors and labels. Now the vectors are fully selectable, so you can tap anywhere, it'll tell you what you selected. And you could also select the labels as well. And the labels are interesting because there's a layout engine within Maply, which will, every time you stop moving, recalculate where the labels should be and display as many of them as it can. And this is really nice for your kind of standard map display application. And again, these are all selectable, as are all the features within Maply. Now let's take a look at labels in general. So there are 2D labels, and those are, for example here, Panama City is a 2D label, and there are 3D labels. And 3D labels have real size, so they'll change their size will change as you move around and rotate and so on. In addition to labels, we've got markers, and markers are basically icons that you can place on the map itself. So there are 2D markers, like this teardrop shape on the right, and there's also 3D markers like the star on the left. And again, those change size as you move around. Now we can display a lot of features in Maply, and that's kind of what it's good at. So here we're going to see about 1,000 markers at any given time on the screen. And we let the layout engine decide which ones we're going to display, and it will fill those in. And the frame rate's still pretty good, so we can display a lot of these features without suffering too much in the way of a frame rate drop. The last feature we're going to look at here are stickers, and stickers are basically just large markers that can cover a large extent of the map itself. Now, in addition to these basic features, there are some more advanced features which are interesting. One of them is a vector paging layer, and what that is basically is a means of paging in vector tiles. So for example, you can have a remote set of vector tiles In this case, we're using the US OpenStreetMap server. They have an experimental vector tile server. So you page in a remote set of vector tiles, and the system will handle the hard work for you. Essentially, you just provide a mechanism for getting a given vector tile, just like we do in image tile, and the system will handle deleting it when it's done, turning it on and off to deal with higher resolutions, and asking you for the proper ones at the proper time. And this is all done simultaneously on multiple threads, so it can be very fast. Now in this particular example, we're paging in tiles from the San Francisco area, which contain buildings, water, land use, roads, labels, all sorts of other stuff. And this is a fairly flexible way of doing things, so you can have your own vector tiles that you read either locally from the device or more likely from a remote server that you might set up. Well, that's pretty much it for Maply 2.2. I would say give it a try.